You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 30th of August 2013. 400,000 foreign nationals on benefits. A red top gets it right for once. Sunday Mirror exposes paedophile global abuse network on Twitter. 1 million Commonwealth migrants could decide next election. Chippy on the green under new management with English owners. France makes it easier to become French. Another 40,000 stores shuttering in Greece. Swedish man charged for honking at mosque. Sweden, honk if you like paying £13,000 to a would-be gang rapist. Kim Jong-un's ex-girlfriend executed for making sex tapes. Harvard study, no correlation between gun control and less violent crime. What is wrong with the Express? BNP leader Nick Griffin travels to Syria to negotiate peace. Photo of Marine who slowed down to help boy 9 in 5-kilometre race goes viral. Thought for the day, religion of peace or call to war. And finally, there's gold in them there waters, och aye. UK news. 400,000 foreign nationals on benefits. The Telegraph reports their analysis of Department for Work and Pensions data shows that the number of foreign nationals claiming benefits, such as job seekers allowance, has jumped by 40% in just 4 years to more than 400,000. Britain will face a new wave of Eastern European immigration with a relaxation of border controls on Romanian and Bulgarian workers on January the 1st, and these figures will grow once again. The new benefit claimant figures also showed there were 102,000 claimants from Africa last year, 132,000 from Asia and the Middle East. European claimants, including Eastern European nationals, made up the largest group at nearly 139,000. The figures mean 1 in 14 people claiming in-work benefits were foreigners. The Telegraph goes on to say, crucially, the new figures do not include all types of welfare handouts. A red top gets it right for once. Sunday Mirror exposes paedophile global abuse network on Twitter. A paedophile has been jailed and an international child abuse network uncovered on Twitter after a Sunday Mirror investigation. Police arrested the pervert only 2 hours after the Sunday Mirror handed over disturbing evidence of offenders trading vile images worldwide using the site. And the railway engineer, 36, was put straight behind bars as it emerged he was a registered sex offender released early a few months ago. Detectives are expected to make further UK arrests after the Sunday Mirror discovered 34 suspect Twitter accounts and dozens of child abuse images with victims as young as 4 years old. A number of the seized man's followers hinted that they were based overseas in France, America and the Far East during our undercover operation. Police are likely to liaise with foreign forces to track down their IP addresses. World at 8 states. I've thought of a good punishment for these vile people. Make it so they can't use their fingers on a keyboard, so they can't pick up where they leave off when they're released. Problem solved. 1 million Commonwealth migrants could decide our next election. The Express reports the votes of 1 million immigrants from the Commonwealth could decide the outcome of the next general election, even though they don't hold British passports. They could even sway the result of the promised referendum on Britain's EU membership, campaign group Migration Watch UK warned last night, as it called for a change in the rules to remove voting rights from non-citizens. Commonwealth migrants from 54 states, including Australia, Canada, India, Pakistan and Nigeria, can join the electoral roll on arrival in the UK as long as they have an address here. Migration Watch said that the 2011 census for England and Wales indicated there were an estimated 960,000 Commonwealth citizens without British passports living here who would be old enough to vote in the 2015 election, and even more by the EU referendum planned for 2017. Yet in most cases their own countries do not give UK citizens voting rights. Only a few Caribbean Commonwealth nations, including Jamaica and Barbados, let non-citizen British residents take part in their polls. The World at 8 states. That's what you get with forced multiculturalism. Get used to it or do something about it is my message. Chippy on the green under new management with English owners. Padiham chip shop boss Paul Bradburys' sign on the front of his new Chippy proudly announces that the Chippy on the green is under new management with English owners. Burnley's Lib Dem MP Gordon Birtwistle and the Mayor of Padiham Councillor Vincent Wijeysingha have both issued demands for it to be removed. But defiant Mr Bradbury has no plans to take it down. He said, "I'm not a racist. Anyone who thinks I'm a bigot is narrow-minded. People want to know they're going to be served by somebody English. People have said to us that they are glad somebody English is serving them and that the sign made them want to come in. They've never had anyone in the shop before. We're advertising that we are English. You wouldn't want your fish and chips served to you by someone Turkish or from wherever because it wouldn't be as good a recipe as it would be from somebody English. It doesn't matter what colour or race you are, we'll serve you. We welcome everyone here. I won't be taking the sign down. We don't want to upset anyone and we aren't racist. We wouldn't be serving foreign food if we were racist." The shop, which sells traditional English takeaways along with Chinese food, kebabs and pizza, reopened on Tuesday. Gordon Birtwistle MP said, "I would rather it didn't say what it did. It would be better if it said, serving good quality food to the community. If it is causing consternation to people, it should either be taken down or changed." Mayor of Padiham, Vincent Wijeysingha, said, "I don't think it's a very positive message to be putting out in the community. If it's causing upset, the council should look into it." World at 8 comments, "It's good to see an Englishman with courage, although sad to say he'll have an uphill battle with the politically correct communities of Burnley just to stay open. In fact, this guy has more balls than the average British MP or council official, who have none. The English are one ethnicity no one wants to support. Good luck, Mr Bradbury." European news. France makes it easier to become French. Vive la France. Despite the talk about the French wanting to quit France, it appears to be a popular country after all. After announcing a 14% rise in people gaining French nationality, the government wants to make it even easier. France's Interior Minister Manuel Valls announced on Wednesday that the number of people gaining French nationality in the last year has risen by 14%. And Valls, who was born in Spain but gained French citizenship in 1981, wants those numbers to increase even more. In 2012, 46,000 applications for French citizenship were accepted by authorities, but the Interior Minister wants that number to top 100,000 in the future. World at 8. What a role model for nationalism, not. Sounds like a communist state in the offing over the Channel. And of course, taking the long view, more foreigners to vote for the socialist government in the future. Another 40,000 stores shuttering in Greece. Ansamed reports while Greek Prime Minister Antonis Samaras says the country is on a course to begin a recovery by the end of next year, the lingering effects of austerity measures are continuing to kill businesses, with another 40,000 expected to close by the end of the year, as Greek Reporter website writes, citing a survey published by the Institute of Small Enterprise of the General Confederation of Professionals, Craftsmen and Merchants. The report also showed that the business is falling for 75% of them, and they expect it will get worse, not better, as Samaras has predicted. The Federation said that the number of bankrupt businesses will surpass 90,000 this year, although other estimates have it as high as 110,000. With the closings, the country's record unemployment rate is growing too, with nearly 1.4 million people out of work, and the government planning to fire as many as 40,000 more over the next 2 years. The report was based on a sample of 1,200 very small and small enterprises, so as to paint a much clearer picture of the financial state in the sectors of manufacturing, trade and services. Such businesses reflect 99.6% of enterprises in Greece. World at 8. That's the EU and the Euro for you. Swedish man charged for honking at mosque. Swedish prosecutors have decided to charge a 22-year-old man for honking his horn outside the Fittja Mosque in Stockholm, citing his intention to disturb the Muslim congregation. The 22-year-old is being charged with storand av förrättning, the crime of intentionally disrupting a religious or spiritual ceremony, including weddings and funerals. It also outlaws disturbing court cases and certain state proceedings, and is punishable with up to 6 months in jail according to Sweden's penal code. The defendant meanwhile has denied the charge that he on purpose sounded his horn to disturb the congregation as the call to prayer rang out at the mosque, which lies next to a lake and a car park in the southern suburb. Also in Sweden, honk if you like paying £13,000 to a would-be gang rapist. In December 2011, a Swedish mother of two was subjected to a brutal gang rape by 12 Afghan immigrants in a refugee camp in Mariannelund. Reports state the rape was oral, anal and vaginal, sometimes with 3 rapists inside her at the same time, while everybody was cheering and clapping. The gruesome rape marathon lasted 7 hours. 11 suspects may have been involved, taking turns while drinking and getting high on drugs. The asylum seekers were cheering and clapping their hands during the rape marathon while calling the victim a whore and a slut. Only 7 of the 12 rapists were convicted, but now one who wasn't convicted and who only passively participated by masturbating next to the woman's face while his comrades raped her is going to get more than £13,000 in compensation because of a clerical error. The compensation, according to the Chancellor of Justice, is higher than normal due to the man's asylum seeker status. The victim is now confined to a wheelchair, suffering severe mental distress. The Swedish media concealed the ethnicity of the perpetrators and quickly removed the story. Swedish socialists say it would be racist to deport the rapists. A World at 8 reporter comments, "Now you can see what's happening in Europe. You can violently assault a young woman causing actual bodily harm, and if Muslim get away with it, and yet a Swede cannot honk his horn near a mosque because it could disturb the attendees. Are we living in the real world or a ghastly duplicate?" World News: Kim Jong-un's ex-girlfriend executed for making sex tapes. A jarring report out of North Korea that claims Kim Jong-un's former girlfriend was executed by a firing squad last week. Chosun Ilbo, an English-language newspaper in South Korea, said unnamed sources in China told it that Hyun Song-wol of Electric Horse Lady fame was arrested on August the 17th, along with about a dozen others. Hyun was a singer and a number of the others were members of the Unhasu Orchestra. They were accused of making a sex tape and selling it and were shot 3 days later for violating the country's pornography laws. The report has not been independently verified by other media outlets. Chosun Ilbo is one of Seoul's main daily newspapers. New York Magazine said that while it's difficult to verify reports like these, the fact that it's one of South Korea's main daily papers reporting it lends a sliver of believability. Harvard study: no correlation between gun control and less violent crime. A Harvard study titled "Would Banning Firearms Reduce Murder and Suicide?" looks at figures for intentional deaths throughout the continental Europe and juxtaposes them with the US to show that more gun control does not necessarily lead to lower death rates or violent crime. Because the findings so clearly demonstrate that more gun laws may in fact increase death rates, the study says that the mantra that more guns mean more deaths and that fewer guns therefore mean fewer deaths is wrong. In fact, the numbers presented in the Harvard study support the contention that among the nations studied, those with more gun control tend towards higher death rates. World at 8 states, this is because in countries where ordinary citizens are not allowed to bear arms for protection, the only people who do bear arms are the criminal gangs, nutters and certain sections of the police force. What is wrong with the Express? British National Party leader Nick Griffin travels to Syria to negotiate peace. Owen Bennett of the Express writes BNP leader Nick Griffin has announced he is travelling to Syria to act as a peace envoy. The British National Party website revealed the party's leader, accompanied by National Treasurer Clive Jefferson and Head of Publicity Charlie Wyeth, is en route to the Middle East country. Mr Griffin, who is a member of the European Parliament, is putting his life on the line to try and stop the UK and US attacking Syria. A British National Party spokesman said, "Once again Nick Griffin is putting his life on the line to stop the Cameron regime from committing war crimes in the name of the British people. And if we cannot prevent it, the least we can do is make sure that the British people know that the only member of Parliament with any balls is campaigning for peace while Cameron's regime is committing more crimes in the name of the British people." In June, Mr Griffin visited Syria as a guest of President Bashar al-Assad and compared Damascus to Troubles-era Belfast. The visit comes as Parliament discusses the UK's response to the use of chemical weapons in Syria, which Mr Cameron and President Barack Obama believe was ordered by President Assad. An exclusive poll for the Express Online shows only 8% of Britons are in favour of an immediate attack on Syria. The British National Party stated, "The whole country is watching as another British Prime Minister defies the British public, rejects common sense and casts aside all moral decency by threatening to attack a foreign and sovereign nation with military strikes. Warmongers William Hague and David Cameron have refused to reach a solution by diplomatic means and are rushing headlong into war. The British National Party considers it a criminal offence to interfere by way of military strikes on nations which do not threaten our own." Photo of Marine who slowed down to help boy 9 in 5-kilometre race goes viral. Hearts are being warmed by the story of a tough Marine who made sure a young boy separated from his group in a 5-kilometre street race managed to make it to the finish line. Lance Corporal Miles Kerr, 19, started the race at a festival in the Michigan town of Charlevoix with the intention of beating some fellow Marines. But his plans were diverted by 9-year-old Bowden Fuchs, who had become separated from the group he started the race with. As told by the Seal of Honour group on Facebook, the struggling boy asked Kerr, "Sir, will you please run with me?" Throughout the course, Lance Corporal Kerr urged Bowden on when the boy wanted to give up, ensuring he made it to the end where he was reunited with his party. Lance Corporal Kerr may have ended the race with the slowest time for his age group, but he's the one getting the shout-outs for his kind deed. The Facebook account, which includes a picture of the two running together, had been liked by more than 211,000 people by Friday morning and shared nearly 47,500 times. Well-to-date comments. This is one time when social media sites actually help the human race. They can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Good for this Marine. Let's hope this kid wasn't a plant to slow him down. Call me cynical. Thought for the day. Religion of peace or call to war? All Muslims quote that Islam is a religion of peace. But is it? It doesn't seem to live up to its hype at all, and indeed hasn't really since it was invented over 800 years ago. I feel deep down it was a business venture carried out by a clever man, and he filled the vacuum at the time for the desert tribes who weren't Jewish or Christian, or in fact anything much in between. As my name stems from one of these tribes, I feel I have the right to make a statement on it. Their holy book, the Quran, in fact doesn't glorify God or Allah as much as it does Muhammad, and if read you will see it sets out strict rules of living, eating and conducting a way of life which technically went out when they invented the wheel. It's not moved with the times and neither have its people. Most, if not all Muslims are stuck in the Middle Ages and still in the deserts of Saudi Arabia mentally. This is tragically evident when the peoples of this particular religion migrate to Europe and Great Britain. It wasn't for nothing that the Ottoman Empire was ejected from Spain and parts of Eastern Europe. Islam does not want to merge in with other religions or peoples. It, like all parasites, needs a host to convert or feed its young to. And the peoples of Europe in those medieval days were much more patriotic than nowadays, and more governed by their churches, whether they were Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox or whatever. The Jewish population of Europe were also persecuted, but not because they had invaded a country, but because they were different. However, in most cases, notably in Germany, they lived for hundreds of years, and although not integrating in the true sense of the word, they applied their people to mainly financial matters and kept themselves to themselves. They have never sought to convert or subdue the people or country they've travelled to. Fact. Now our Islamic friends are a totally different matter and a totally different animal, and in many cases that's an insult to animals who often conduct themselves much better than these mainly parasitical and roving creatures. Liz Jones of the Mail, for whom I normally have a lot of time, has really plumbed the depths as far as I'm concerned. She wrote an article in the Mail on Sunday about joining the peace march in Bosnia with obligatory visits to the mass graves of 8,000 Muslim men and boys killed in 1995. I can imagine there was a lot of rending of garments or whatever, but what has happened over the mass graves of the Christian Serbs? She whittles on about the fact she met one mixed marriage couple of a Muslim Bosnian and a Catholic, trying to illustrate that everyone was one big happy family until the naughty Serbs decided on a whim to ethnically cleanse their portion of their country. My advice to Jones is, one swallow does not a summer make. The Christians in Bosnia and surrounding areas had been having huge trouble with their Muslim neighbours, but much like now in Europe, no one was listening and no one wanted to know. Probably until it's too late, much like parts of the former Yugoslavia. They rape Muslim women as payback for the years of rapes carried out by Muslims that had gone unreported. They called time on their problem in a terrible yet positive way. The Serbs did try to remove the Islamic influence, and left to themselves they would have. But of course the international communities decided that Islam is the religion that needs protecting and interfered yet again. Now we have peace marches and the lauding of Islam and the whining over what happened all spread over my Sunday supplement, which I could well do without. Now of course big business is capitalising on the Muslim population and putting huge amounts of money into Bosnian Islamic coffers, with which they will build Bosnia in their image and already outnumber the Serbs. Any mention of a Serb having human rights in his own country is beyond the pale, and it's a similar situation throughout many parts of Eastern Europe and indeed even as far north as Sweden. Now in Sweden we have reported in this news on a terrible story of a young mother who was raped in a 7-hour non-stop gang rape by 12 Afghan Muslim refugees, and the fact the entire tragedy of this young woman has been ignored in favour of her attackers. The victim is now confined to a wheelchair and suffers severe mental problems. To make matters worse, the Swedish media concealed the ethnicity of the perpetrators and quickly removed the story, and Swedish socialists have said it would be racist to deport the rapists. Sound familiar? Think Charlene Downs and many unknowns, and also drummer Lee Rigby, amongst many other unreported crimes perpetrated by people and so-called communities of the Muslim faith. It's a sad fact that these types of crimes are still occurring wherever there is a Muslim population of some size, and you have to understand that these particular criminals in Sweden were asylum seekers, not legal in any sense of the word, but their rights have been placed over the human rights of an indigenous Swedish-born young mother in her own country. The media is culpable as well as the law. Do you really think that if this had happened in Saudi and a young Muslim mother had been violently raped by 12 Swedes with a jeering audience of many more Swedish louts, that the Saudis would have sat by and even paid one of the Swedes money? I really don't think so. And my point being, if we in Europe, with the help of the EU, are supposed to accommodate millions of Islamic parasites in our country, surely the laws of rape, underage sex, abduction, money laundering, drugs, sex trafficking and much, much more should reflect the religion of the people who are carrying out most of these crimes, and deportation should be the normal sentence, if not very hard labour, without halal food and prayer rooms. You must understand, I'm not talking about Syrian regimes here, I'm talking about the fact that since the invention of Islam there's been only peace when the followers of this religion have been isolated within their own so-called countries. They're fine as long as they can still send their miserable and awful peasants away to Europe and chug away living life as it was hundreds of years ago. The problems start in their countries when the few Islamic fanatics realise that we in the West, together with being so keen to take them all in, are also apparently happy to help them in their search for the holy grail of democracy. And hey, we're off again. Like Don Quixote tilting at the mosques, which are virtually and unfortunately untouchable. We have in this country many instances of riots, race hatred to us by Muslims, harassment, sex trafficking of minors, grooming of same, and none of it has been aired in our media like Bosnia was and the latest chemical attack in Syria, of which there's no concrete evidence of who did what, and anyway the Americans used chemical warfare for years in Vietnam, and we also used chemical warfare in Iraq. We have no right in the West to be so horrified or so shocked. We have in the UK places where the former white occupiers cannot go or keep living in, and I'm not talking about sink estates here, I'm talking about nice residential roads which used to be full of working and middle class white citizens, and I've said before, not perfect, but of our tribes. We white and sometimes Christian peoples are under threat in our own country, and this threat is even more serious when it's ignored by the people who we elect to look after us. There is more concern over a country that can look after itself and will not, quite rightly, welcome Western interference than there is over how we, the Brits, are going to cope with even more Muslims on this small island in the North Sea due to their breeding record. It must be my old biblical blood, but I don't forget and I don't forgive, and I believe in taking a head for an eye, and that hasn't abated with age. And I can see that there are a lot of pink glasses being handed out around the UK governmental bodies, the EU certainly, and as for the UN, well forget it. The message is out, open season on white Christians, but human rights, consideration and in many cases sheer pro-Islamic bigotry is alive and well in Europe. The real tragedy will come when even we will be sick of being put on the back burner in favour of a bunch of foreigners. When our land and houses are gone, our food supplies dwindle, our long established public services crumble, and we will be expected to share what is left to the detriment of our families and our people. These Muslim parasites should not live in the UK or Europe. They are incompatible with any other form of religion, and yet we continue to accept them and laud them. They don't want or need our acceptance. They do their own thing, and why not? They're not stopped from harassing white householders or non-Muslim pedestrians. They're not stopped from abducting and grooming very young girls. And if you search a house in which a nationalist lives, beware. The police will make a mess and not be liable, whereas searching a Muslim household, if they dare, they will not be allowed to bring dogs in or make a mess, or if they do, they will pay for it. This is the telling thing. How our authorities behave towards us, who pay their wages, and it's a very different way to the way Muslims are treated. It's not entirely their fault. They get this message, do what thou wilt, it shall be the whole of the law, which is the Golden Dawn ethos written by Alistair Crowley, or rather the Great Beast. We in Europe and the UK have let our establishments give the wrong message, as opposed to our medieval forefathers. We have said, come in, do what you want to do, and there'll be no laws or no controls, whereas our forefathers said, get out, and if you don't get out, you'll pay for it. Meanwhile, we are paying for multiculturalism with the lives of our own people, their culture, their lifestyle, their history, their future and their country. In Hampshire at the moment there's the enormous Jalsa Salana festival, which houses over 30,000 Muslims in a vast tented field, and I'm sure you can understand that my feelings over this are anything but Christian. And in fact I'm wondering what the UAF are doing. They're against fascism in all its forms, aren't they? And you can't get a worse fascist than a Muslim. And finally there's gold in them thar waters, och aye. A fishing trawler cruise prank backfired after they posted photos on Facebook of a fake gold bar and were met by police as soon as they docked. The fishermen boasted they'd found 11 bars of bullion worth £1.5 million, when in fact the metal was an old brass bracket. Skiller Billy Anderson, 36, had to explain to police that it was simply a piece of scrap his boat landed while fishing for scallops and not bullion rumoured to be on the seabed from the infamous 1983 Brinksmat robbery, where £26 million was stolen from a Heathrow warehouse. Mr Anderson, who works for TN Trawlers in Arran, and his crew of 6 cut up the bracket with an angle grinder so he could trick his fiancée into thinking they were suddenly rich, according to The Sun. The fisherman's boast quickly spread throughout other boats, and Mr Anderson was met with requests to give the precise location of his find, 16 miles off Falmouth in Cornwall. Mr Anderson from Dumfries, Scotland had to persuade his fiancée Claire Muir, 29, not to go on a lavish shopping spree, and eventually told his boat's owners the truth after they prepared to send 2 more vessels to the site. Police were also tricked by the convincing prank and are believed to have electronically tracked the boat's movements. Mr Anderson said 2 detectives and a PC were ready to meet the vessel at Newlyn in Cornwall when it docked after a 7-day voyage. He said, when I saw them waiting for me on the pier, I knew the joke had gone too far. But luckily they saw the funny side. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. 40,000 stores shuttering in Greece. Swedish man charged for honking at mosque. Sweden, honk if you like paying £13,000 to a would-be gang rapist. Kim Jong-un's ex-girlfriend executed for making sex tapes. Harvard study, no correlation between gun control and less violent crime. What is wrong with the Express? BNP leader Nick Griffin travels to Syria to negotiate peace. Photo of Marine who slowed down to help boy 9 in 5-kilometre race goes viral. Thought for the day, religion of peace or call to war. And finally, there's gold in them there waters, och aye. UK news. 400,000 foreign nationals on benefits. The Telegraph reports their analysis of the Far East during our undercover operation. Police are likely to liaise with foreign forces to track down their IP addresses. World at 8 states. I've thought of a good punishment for these vile people. Make it so they can't use their fingers on a keyboard, so they can't pick up where they leave off when they're released. Problem solved. 1 million Commonwealth migrants could decide our next election. The Express reports the votes of 1 million immigrants from the Commonwealth could decide the outcome of the next general election, even though they don't hold British passports. They could even sway the result of the promised referendum on Britain's EU membership, campaign group Migration Watch UK warned last night, as it called for a change in the rules to remove voting rights from non-citizens. Commonwealth migrants from 54 states include all types of welfare handouts. A red top gets it right for once. Sunday Mirror exposes paedophile global abuse network on Twitter. A paedophile has been jailed and an international child abuse network uncovered on Twitter after a Sunday Mirror investigation. Police arrested the pervert only 2 hours after the Sunday Mirror handed over disturbing evidence of offenders trading vile images worldwide using the site. And the railway engineer, 36, was put straight behind bars as it emerged he was a registered sex offender released early a few months ago. Detectives are expected to make further UK arrests after the Sunday Mirror discovered 34 suspect Twitter accounts and dozens of child abuse images with victims as young as 4 years old. A number of the seized man's followers hinted that they were based overseas in France, America and the Department for Work and Pensions. Data shows that the number of foreign nationals claiming benefits, such as job seekers allowance, has jumped by 40% in just 4 years to more than 400,000. Britain will face a new wave of Eastern European immigration with a relaxation of border controls on Romanian and Bulgarian workers on January the 1st, and these figures will grow once again. The new benefit claimant figures also showed there were 102,000 claimants from Africa last year, 132,000 from Asia and the Middle East. European claimants, including Eastern European nationals, made up the largest group at nearly 139,000. The figures mean 1 in 14 people claiming in-work benefits were foreigners. The Telegraph goes on to say, crucially, the new figures do not include.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 30th of August 2013. 400,000 foreign nationals on benefits. A red top gets it right for once. Sunday Mirror exposes paedophile global abuse network on Twitter. 1 million Commonwealth migrants could decide next election. Chippy on the green under new management with English owners. France makes it easier to become French. Another